There's something about the way children squeal with joy at the sight of balloons that always used to melt my heart, until that particular day when my daughter's quiet, confused stare carved a hollow place inside me that I'm not sure I'll ever fully fill again. It was one of those perfect, interest-worthy spring afternoons that make you forget, if only for a moment, how messy families can be. The kind of bright, vibrant day when sunlight filters through tree leaves like gold dust and every giggle, every footstep, every breath feels like it's happening just a little slower, like the universe wants you to savor it. I remember the warmth of the sun brushing across the tops of my shoulders as we stepped out of the car, my daughter Maya beside me, clutching a small wrapped gift in both hands with the kind of pride only a 7-year-old can have over a Barbie-themed art set. We had arrived at my cousin Danielle's birthday bash, a party that honestly looked more like a small-scale wedding reception than a casual family get-together. There were helium-filled unicorn balloons bobbing above the gate like a pastel army, and 2 catering vans were still unloading trays of hors d'oeuvres. Kids dashed across the backyard, some barefoot and sticky-fingered, others in crisp white dresses or matching suspenders, all of them screeching and laughing with that unrestrained joy that fills you up just watching it. The backyard was strewn with twinkle lights and custom signage that spelled out, Danielle's Fabulous 8, in oversized pink glitter letters. I remember thinking as we walked up the path and waved to a couple of neighbors that it almost felt like too much. But then again, Danielle always was the golden child. Maya glanced up at me, her ponytail bobbing as she skipped slightly. "Do you think she'll like it?" she asked, referring to the present we had wrapped together the night before. "I think she's going to love it," I replied with a soft smile, brushing a hand over the top of her head. "Especially because it's from you." That was our rhythm, Maya and me. Just the two of us for the most part. Her dad and I had separated a little over a year before, and while we shared custody, it always felt like she lived with me in all the emotional ways that counted. I knew her moods, the quiet way she got when she was unsure of herself, the little sideways glances she gave when she needed reassurance but didn't want to ask. We'd worked hard to build something calm and predictable in the middle of the stormy, uneven love the rest of our family had offered us for years. But I wasn't expecting the storm to hit us like this. Not here. Not at a child's birthday party. And certainly not from my own sister. My sister Lauren greeted us near the front table, all smiles and lipstick and high-waisted linen pants. Her hair twisted up in that casual bun that somehow always looked effortless and chic in a way I could never replicate no matter how many tutorial videos I watched. She hugged Maya a little too quickly, barely making eye contact, and gave me a cheek kiss that felt like a brush of cold wind. Then she returned to her clipboard, checking the itinerary like she was running a gala and not a party for a 3rd grader. That should have been my first clue. About 30 minutes in, after cupcakes were served and the bubble machine started chugging full throttle near the swing set, Lauren stood on the deck and clapped her hands, her red manicured nails catching the light like little sirens. "Okay, everyone, gift bags are ready," she called out in that hostess voice of hers that I'd known since prom dress shopping and summer church plays. "There's a little something for everyone, well, everyone who matters," she added with a laugh that sent ice down my spine. It was the kind of laugh that didn't invite you to join in, it told you exactly where you stood. Kids swarmed the table like bees to honey, and I was just about to turn away and grab Maya another juice box when I saw her standing still, small and silent among the chaos. She was holding a paper bag, one of the cheap ones from the party store, not like the sparkly cellophane ones the other kids were clutching. She turned it over in her hands looking puzzled, and then I saw the note taped to the front. It was written in a curlicue font, the kind Lauren always used for bridal showers and dinner party menus. It read, "Next year try harder." For a second I didn't understand what I was looking at. I blinked, almost sure I was reading it wrong. But then Maya looked up at me, her lips slightly parted, her eyes wide and wet with confusion and the kind of hurt no child should ever have to swallow at a birthday party. She didn't cry. Not right then. That was the worst part. She just asked in a voice so small it barely reached me, "Did I do something wrong?" And my heart cracked open. I walked over to her slowly, reached out, and took the bag from her hand. I didn't say anything. I just crumpled it gently and tucked it into my purse like I was saving evidence because in some small way I was. Then I bent down to her level, placed both hands on her shoulders, and said softly, "We're going to go now, okay?" "But I haven't given her the present yet," Maya whispered, her voice trembling now. "That's all right," I said, brushing a piece of hair from her cheek and forcing a smile that hurt my face to make. "We'll give it to someone who deserves it." I stood, took her hand, and started walking toward the gate. Not a single person stopped us. Not Lauren, who had turned her back and was laughing with one of her friends. Not our cousin Danielle's mom, who offered a half-hearted wave and then pretended to answer a fake phone call. Not even my own mother, who I saw out of the corner of my eye, sipping a flute of champagne and pretending she didn't see us leave. Maya didn't speak the whole way to the car. Her grip tightened around my fingers, and I could feel her holding back tears the way only kids who've already learned how to make themselves smaller know how to do. I opened the door for her, helped her in, and once I was behind the wheel, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding since I saw that note. I didn't cry either. Not then. Instead, I looked at my daughter through the rearview mirror and I made a quiet promise, one I didn't say out loud but one I felt down to my bones. I would never let anyone make her feel that small again. And I wasn't going to let Lauren get away with this, not this time. Not quietly. Not because it was easier or because I didn't want to start a fight. I didn't start this one. But I would damn well finish it. The drive home was filled with the soft hum of the road and Maya's occasional sniffles. I reached back and handed her a tissue without turning around. "Do you want to talk about it?" I asked gently, my voice calm despite the fire churning in my chest. She was quiet for a moment and then she said, "Why did Aunt Lauren write that? Why did she say I didn't try hard enough?" I swallowed hard before answering. Because sometimes people don't know how to be kind. And sometimes they don't realize how hurtful their words can be. She nodded slowly, wiping her eyes. "But I made her a bracelet. I even put her name on it." "I know, baby," I said. "And that was beautiful. You put love into it. That's more than most people do." We got home and made grilled cheese sandwiches, the kind with the crusts cut off just the way Maya liked. We watched a movie, cuddled on the couch, and I kept glancing at her, seeing that flicker of sadness that hadn't quite faded. She tried to laugh at the funny parts, but her heart wasn't in it. Later, after I tucked her in and kissed her forehead, I sat alone in the living room and stared at the little crumpled bag still in my purse. I thought about every moment I'd let Lauren's snide remarks slide in the past. Every joke about single motherhood, every condescending comment about how I was strong for doing it all, as if I'd chosen this path out of rebellion and not necessity. And I decided something, no more. Tomorrow, I would show Maya what standing up for yourself looks like. And I had the perfect plan to do it. The smell of cinnamon and brown sugar always reminded me of the holidays, of warm kitchens and cozy laughter, of a time when my family still felt like a team instead of a silent war zone divided by sharp words and cold shoulders. I stood over the skillet that morning, gently stirring the spiced apples I was caramelizing for the French toast I promised Maya the night before, watching the syrup bubble slowly as the early sun streamed through the kitchen window. It cast soft amber lines across the tile floor, creating that illusion of calm that often comes before something terrible or unexpected. I could hear Maya humming faintly from the living room, still in her pajamas, one foot tucked beneath her as she colored with markers and kept glancing out the window as if waiting for something to make sense again. She hadn't said much since we left Danielle's party. She hadn't even asked about her cousin. She just went quiet in that way kids do when they're trying to process something too big for their age. Something they don't have words for yet. I was giving her space, but every time I looked at her, I felt that same stab of guilt and helplessness twisting in my stomach. That note. That party. That hurt expression on her face. It all played on a loop in my mind, louder than any music, sharper than any noise. I was flipping the last slice of French toast when my phone buzzed across the counter with such insistence that I nearly dropped the spatula. It wasn't just one buzz, it was several. All in rapid succession, the kind of digital avalanche that usually means bad news, or drama, or both. I wiped my hands quickly on a towel, glanced at Maya to make sure she was still occupied, and picked up the phone with a twinge of unease curling through my chest. There were 3 unread texts from Lauren. The first one was just a stream of expletives, capital letters and symbols that looked like a teenager had taken over her phone. The second text read, "Whoever did this is going to pay. This is vandalism. This is a crime." And the third simply said, "I know it was you." For a second I just blinked at the screen the way you do when you're still trying to piece together what you're looking at. My mind hadn't caught up with the words yet, and for a brief blissful moment I thought maybe she'd been hacked. That someone else had sent those messages in some ridiculous prank. But then my phone started ringing with a FaceTime request, and I saw her name flashing across the screen. And I knew this wasn't a joke. I answered not because I wanted to but because I couldn't look away. Lauren's face filled the screen. Flushed, blotchy and streaked with mascara. Her hair, usually sleek and shellacked into place, was hanging in frizzy clumps around her face, and her voice was already high-pitched and teetering on the edge of hysteria before she even said my name. "Do you think this is funny?" she screamed, tilting the camera violently toward her yard, and then back to her face. "Do you think this is some kind of revenge prank because your weird little kid couldn't handle not getting a fancy gift bag?" I stared at the screen in disbelief, my pulse suddenly hammering in my neck as she flipped the camera again, showing the pristine front lawn of her suburban palace, now defaced with bold, bright red spray paint letters, each one at least 2 feet high, carved into the manicured green like an angry scar. The words stretched across nearly the entire front yard, starting at the sidewalk and slashing up to her walkway like a war cry. "Try harder next time." I was so stunned I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there, the phone in my hand, the skillet behind me slowly sizzling, the smell of sugar and apples turning bitter as they started to burn. Lauren was ranting, pacing across the frame, shrieking about neighborhood associations, police reports and surveillance cameras, her voice rising and falling like a siren. But I was frozen, caught between disbelief and something else, something harder to name. Not guilt. Not exactly. But something adjacent to satisfaction. Because while I had not done this, and I mean that honestly, I hadn't even left the house since the party, I couldn't deny the poetic justice of it. The symmetry. The sheer force of the message, painted in the exact words she had used to humiliate my daughter less than 24 hours earlier. I finally found my voice, but it came out calm even. "Lauren," I said, still watching the screen as she flipped the camera back to herself. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Oh, please," she snapped, jabbing her finger at the phone like she was pressing into my forehead. "Don't play dumb. You're the only person who would have a reason to do this. You and that little brat of yours." The word brat set something off in me. I felt my spine straighten, felt my hand grip the edge of the counter to steady myself. "You do not get to call my daughter names," I said, my voice low now dangerous. "Not after what you pulled yesterday. Not after that cruel little note you put on her bag like she was some contestant in your sick version of a popularity contest." Lauren scoffed, throwing her hands up dramatically. "It was a joke," she shouted. "Jesus, you people are so sensitive. It was a party favor, not a manifesto." "It was a message," I replied quietly, my eyes narrowing. "And now you've got one of your own." Her face twisted with fury. "You think this is funny?" "No," I said, still staring straight at her. "But I do think it's fitting." She hung up on me then, slamming her finger into the screen so hard I half expected to hear glass shatter through the phone. I stood there in the kitchen for another minute, the silence thick and crackling around me, until I realized the French toast was burning. I turned off the stove, took a deep breath, and called Maya to the table. She came in quietly, her hair tousled and one marker-streaked hand rubbing at her eye. "Is breakfast ready?" she asked, her voice soft but hopeful, and I nodded, sliding the plate in front of her like it was the only thing that mattered right now. As she ate, I kept watching her, wondering if she'd heard any of the call, wondering if she'd seen the spray paint, wondering if somehow she'd done something. But no, Maya was 7. Thoughtful, yes. Sensitive, definitely. But not vindictive. Not malicious. Not capable of sneaking out of the house in the middle of the night to spray paint her aunt's yard. I knew that in my bones, which meant someone else had done it. Someone who knew what had happened. Someone who had been there at the party. The possibilities started unspooling in my head like thread from a frayed seam, messy and impossible to contain. Could it have been another parent who saw the note and felt as disgusted as I did? Could it have been one of the older kids? A teenage cousin? Even one of Danielle's classmates who'd noticed the disparity between gift bags and decided to retaliate in some dramatic act of playground justice? I didn't know. And part of me didn't even care. Because while I didn't condone vandalism, and I certainly wasn't about to start defending graffiti as an appropriate form of communication, there was something undeniably cathartic about it. The way those words now lived on Lauren's perfect lawn, cutting through her carefully curated image like a blade. The way she was now the one on the receiving end of a message she couldn't control, couldn't laugh off, couldn't hide behind a clipboard or a smile. She wanted to play power games. Someone just showed her how it felt to lose one. That afternoon I got a call from my mother. Of course I did. She never called just to chat. Her number only popped up when there was drama to dissect, usually followed by a generous helping of passive-aggressive scolding. I let it go to voicemail, knowing exactly what would be waiting for me when I finally listened. And sure enough, the message started with a sigh. "Hi, it's me," she said, as if that voice hadn't been burned into my brain since I was old enough to recognize disappointment in a tone. "I just got off the phone with your sister. She's very upset. And honestly, I don't blame her." There was a pause, followed by a soft task sound that always preceded the real lecture. "Whatever happened between you two, I would have hoped you'd be mature enough not to escalate things like this. This is a family, not a battlefield." Another pause. "Call me." I didn't. Instead, I made Maya a hot cocoa and we watched an old animated movie she loved, the one with the clumsy talking dog and the girl who dreams of going to Paris. I tucked her in early, brushed her hair back from her forehead, and read 3 bedtime stories in a row because she asked so sweetly I couldn't say no. And when she finally drifted off, one hand curled beneath her cheek, her breathing soft and even, I just sat there beside her for a long time, my fingers tangled in the edge of her blanket, thinking about how fragile these years were. And how fiercely I wanted to protect them. Later, alone in the living room with a glass of wine and the soft hum of the refrigerator as my only company, I finally allowed myself to think about what came next. Lauren wouldn't let this go. She never did. She'd twist it, spin it, turn herself into the victim until the whole family was rallying around her again. That was her gift, making chaos and then pretending she was the one cleaning it up. I could already picture the group texts, the whispered phone calls, the way our aunts and cousins would start looking at me sideways at the next family dinner. They'd ask if I was doing okay in that tone that meant they thought I wasn't. They'd smile too wide and ask if I needed help, which was really just code for, "Can you please stop being a problem?" But I wasn't going to be quiet anymore. Not for them. Not for Lauren. Not even for the illusion of peace that we all clung to like it was holy. If Lauren wanted a war, she could have one. But it wouldn't be loud or messy or painted on a lawn. It would be honest. Me finally telling the truth. Me finally holding people accountable. Me showing Maya that standing up for yourself doesn't always look like yelling, but it always looks like choosing dignity over silence. I looked down at my phone, still sitting face down on the coffee table. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was the one holding the pen. Tomorrow, I'd write a letter. Not a text. Not a call. A real letter. And I'd send copies to every member of our family. I would tell them what happened at that party, word for word. I'd include a photo of the note. And I would ask them just one question. If this had been your child, what would you have done? Because maybe, just maybe, it was time they all tried a little harder. It didn't take long for the family group chat to ignite like dry brush catching a lit match, a slow, crackling burn that erupted into full-blown flames by mid-morning. I had barely opened my eyes when the first buzz came. One long vibration that pulled me out of a dream I couldn't quite remember. My hand fumbled on the nightstand for the phone, eyes still heavy with sleep, and I tapped the screen without looking, half expecting another angry message from Lauren or some leftover email from work. But it wasn't just one message. It was 23. And they were all from the Montgomery family thread, the same thread that had remained mostly dormant for years except for birthdays, funeral arrangements, and the occasional recipe exchange. The same thread I had seriously considered muting after the disastrous Thanksgiving 2 years ago when Aunt Lydia brought up politics and my cousin Sean almost got disinvited from Christmas. I sat up in bed, my stomach already beginning to twist, the kind of twist that happens when you know, instinctively, that something is coming and you won't be able to stop it once it does. The first message that loaded on my screen was from Lauren, time-stamped at 7:06 a.m. "Lauren, let me be very clear, I know exactly who did it. And if you think I'm going to sit back and let this kind of behavior go unchecked, you are sorely mistaken." Then came a barrage of replies. "Aunt Lydia, oh dear, what happened now? Uncle Greg, is this about the lawn thing? I heard something from Jenna but wasn't sure what was true. Lauren, yes. It's about the lawn. My yard was vandalized. Spray paint. Huge letters. My neighbors are talking about calling the HOA. This is not a joke. Cousin Jenna, wait, what did it say again? Lauren, try harder next time. Sound familiar?" And then the one that twisted the knife deeper than all the others combined. "Lauren, it's no coincidence that the exact words I wrote, as a joke, by the way, showed up on my lawn the very next morning. It's obvious who did it. And frankly, I'm disgusted. I expected more from you, Emma. Even if your daughter is a little dramatic, this is crossing a line. I stared at my phone for a full 30 seconds, willing the words to shift into something else, something less appalling, and something that didn't burn a hot brand of humiliation into the back of my throat. She hadn't just accused me. She had dragged Maya into it, a child who had spent the day before quietly drawing pictures of animals and asking in whispers if she was still allowed to go to family events. I felt the pressure of something deep and feral begin to rise inside me, the kind of fury that builds slowly when you've been dismissed, misunderstood, and used as a convenient scapegoat for someone else's spiraling control issues. I could almost hear Lauren's voice in my head, dripping with that faux concern tone she loved to use whenever she was about to twist the knife in public but pretend she was trying to help. The next messages were worse. Uncle Greg, wait, Emma, is this true? Did you guys actually does this? Aunt Lydia, that would be really disappointing, sweetheart. No matter what happened at the party, this is not how we solve things. Jenna, you should really think about how this affects Maya. What kind of example are you setting? I wanted to throw the phone across the room. I wanted to scream. I wanted to march down the street and shove the actual footage of the party in their faces and say, do you see? Do you see what she did? How she humiliated my child in front of everyone and called it a joke. But instead I set the phone down gently because Maya was still asleep in the other room, and the last thing I wanted was for her to wake up to the sound of me unraveling. By noon I was fully ostracized. Texts went unanswered. Phone calls weren't returned. Invites to an upcoming baby shower disappeared. Even my own mother, who had called me strong just 2 days before, sent a text that said, I just wish you'd told us if something was bothering you. This isn't healthy. I felt like I was suffocating inside my own house. It was around 2 p.m. when it finally occurred to me, so obvious, so blindingly clear, that I almost laughed. In all of Lauren's righteous indignation and public performance of being the wrong party, she had somehow failed to mention one very crucial detail, her front porch camera. I remembered it distinctly because she had bragged about it during Thanksgiving, showing off how it sent motion-triggered alerts to her phone whenever someone so much as walked by with a stroller. She had even laughed and said it helped her monitor package thieves and unwanted guests. It was mounted right above her front door, angled perfectly to capture the lawn, the sidewalk, and most of the street. And yet she hadn't said a word about it. Hadn't posted a single blurry still or time-stamped clip as proof of her accusation. That could only mean one thing. The footage didn't support her story. Or worse for her, it did, but not in the way she wanted. I stood up so quickly the coffee I had been sipping spilled slightly down the side of the mug. I didn't even bother cleaning it up. I grabbed my bag, my keys, and my phone and told Maya I'd be right back. I didn't know if Lauren was home or not, and I didn't particularly care. If this meant trespassing, so be it. I needed the truth, and I needed it now. When I pulled up to her house, the spray paint was still there, jagged and glaring against the pristine green like a wound that refused to heal. The landscaping team had apparently yet to arrive. I could see a couple of neighbors peeking out from their curtains, but I didn't stop to wave. I walked directly to her porch, opened the decorative wooden box that held the smart camera controls, and tapped the button to cycle through the playback. I had no idea if it would still be there. I had no idea if it had recorded at night, or if it had already been wiped. But it hadn't. The camera had recorded everything. My hands were actually trembling as I fast-forwarded through the footage, watching hours slip by in a time-lapse blur, cars driving by, porch lights flickering on and off, the occasional jogger in a neon hoodie. Then around 2:38 a.m., I saw the figure appear. My breath caught in my throat. It was a teenage girl, skinny, long-legged, in pajama shorts and an oversized sweatshirt. Her face was mostly shadowed by the hood pulled over her head, but as she stepped into the light, I could see her profile clearly. It was Hannah, Lauren's daughter. My niece. She stood there for a moment, frozen in the beam of the porch light, a can of spray paint clutched in one hand. Her other hand was clenched into a fist. She looked around, checking for cars, I assumed, but not once did she look at the camera. It was like she had completely forgotten it existed. Then, without hesitation, she moved to the grass and began to spray. Letter by letter, she wrote the phrase that had broken my daughter's heart the day before. Try harder next time. She didn't rush. She didn't fumble. Her movements were deliberate, like someone who had spent hours turning something over in her mind and finally reached a decision she couldn't come back from. When she finished, she stood there for a moment, staring at the words. Then she dropped the can, wiped her hands on her sweatshirt, and slipped back inside through the side gate. I sat down on the porch step, the video still playing silently in my hand, and let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. It wasn't me. It wasn't Maya. It had been Hannah. Hannah, who had been at the party, who had stood awkwardly near the gift table while her mother handed out bags like prizes in a cruel competition. Hannah, who had glanced at me when I took Maya's hand and walked away, her expression unreadable but her eyes strangely heavy. Hannah, who had once told me during a car ride home from the movies that sometimes her mom made her feel like a show pony, good for Instagram, but not much else. I closed the video and sat in silence, my heart still pounding. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning of something else, something messy, complicated, but perhaps necessary. I stood up, wiped my palms on my jeans, and made a decision. I was going to send the video. But not to Lauren. I was going to send it to the family group chat. Without commentary. Without drama. Just the truth. Let them watch it. Let them see for themselves what really happened. Let them decide whether they still wanted to act like I was the villain in this story. Back at home, I waited. I sat on the couch, phone in hand, staring at the thread. I could see when the video was delivered. I could see when it was viewed. One by one, those little seen indicators appeared beside the names of my relatives. First Jenna. Then Aunt Lydia. Then Uncle Greg. Silence. Then came the replies. Jenna, wait. Is that Hannah? Aunt Lydia, oh my God. Greg, that's not what I expected. Lauren, this is insane. She wouldn't, she's not, this has been edited. This isn't real. Why are you doing this? Jenna, it doesn't look edited. That's your porch camera, right? Lydia, Lauren, why didn't you mention this before? Greg, I think we all owe Emma an apology. I turned off the screen. The day of the meeting arrived like a storm you can see rolling in from miles away. Slow, steady, and impossible to avoid no matter how much you pretend the sky's just a little darker than usual. I didn't sleep the night before, not because I was afraid, but because my mind couldn't stop spinning with every possible outcome. I kept thinking about the faces of my family, the shifting lines of loyalty and silence, and the ways we had all been trained, either by upbringing or obligation, to keep things nice, even when the truth sat like broken glass between us, waiting to cut. Lauren had been the one to suggest the family meeting, which surprised me at first. She sent a short message to the family thread at 9:23 p.m. the night after I released the footage, typing only. We need to talk. My house. Tomorrow. 6 o'clock. No one asked questions. No one declined. It was understood that something had broken wide open, and that silence was no longer a luxury anyone could afford. By the time Maya and I pulled into Lauren's driveway, the sun was starting to dip below the rooftops, casting the lawn in a golden light that somehow made the spray paint even more vivid. The words were still there, faded now but unmistakable, like a scar in the middle of a perfect face. A landscaping team had tried, obviously. There were patches of new grass hastily planted, and the edges of the letters looked scrubbed raw. But the message still lingered, visibly and metaphorically. I reached into the back seat and gave Maya's hand a gentle squeeze. You don't have to say anything tonight, I told her softly, my voice as even as I could make it. Just listen, and if you want to speak, I'll be right there. She nodded, her eyes wide but steady, that same quiet bravery she'd always had showing up again like it always did when she needed it most. We walked to the front door together, and before I could knock, the door opened. Lauren stood there. Her eyes were rimmed with redness, and she looked older than I remembered. Not just tired, something deeper, something like realization. Come in, she said, her voice hoarse and tight. The living room was already half full. Aunt Lydia sat on the edge of the couch, clinging to a tissue like it was her lifeline. Uncle Greg was pacing near the bay window, arms crossed over his chest, as if he wasn't sure whether he was more angry or embarrassed to be involved at all. Cousin Jenna was scrolling her phone nervously, her foot tapping against the floor like a metronome for discomfort. My mother, of course, sat in the corner, her hands folded, her mouth tight, her eyes watching everything but reacting to nothing. And in the middle of it all, standing near the fireplace, was Hannah. Her arms were crossed over her stomach, but her posture was defiant, chin lifted ever so slightly, eyes flickering between her mother and the rest of the room like she was preparing to go to war, even if it cost her everything. I took my seat beside Maya, offered a polite nod to the room, and waited. Lauren cleared her throat, but her voice cracked as soon as she tried to speak. She looked at me, then down, then back at the group. I know. I know things got out of hand, she began, words crawling out like they were too heavy to carry. And I know what's been going around, the video, the lawn, the messages. I wasn't prepared for that. No one ever is, Aunt Lydia said softly, not unkindly. But you still have to face it. Lauren nodded and turned to me. Emma, she said, and then paused again. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to believe that my daughter could, her voice cracked. That she could feel that way. About me. About what I did. I reached into my bag, pulled out the flash drive with the footage and stood. Then let's watch it, I said. Let's not guess. Let's not speculate. Let's just look at the truth together. I didn't ask for permission. I walked over to the TV, connected the drive, and let the footage play. No one spoke. They watched in complete silence as the ghostly black and white images filled the screen, Hannah stepping into frame, her hands shaking only slightly, the can of spray paint dangling from one wrist, her breath visible in the night air. They saw her pause. They saw her look around. They saw her spray the words, slowly and deliberately, then vanish back into the shadows like a dream fading before dawn. When the video ended, I turned off the TV and faced the room. I didn't do this, I said quietly. And neither did my daughter. Lauren's mouth was open slightly, her hand pressed to her lips as if trying to physically hold back whatever reaction wanted to claw its way out. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. Not yet. Hannah stepped forward. She didn't wait for permission either. Mom, she said, her voice trembling at first but growing stronger with every word. I did it. I spray-painted the lawn. And I'm not sorry. Lauren flinched like she'd been slapped but said nothing. I watched you humiliate Maya at that party, Hannah continued. I watched you laugh while she stood there holding that awful bag, like she'd done something wrong just by showing up. And it wasn't the first time. It's not just Maya. You do this to everyone. Hannah, Lauren whispered, her voice breaking. Please. No, Hannah said, louder now. You need to hear this. Because I'm your daughter and even I can barely breathe in this house sometimes. The room was so silent I could hear the ticking of the old kitchen clock. You make everything a competition, Hannah said. Every party, every dinner, every family event, it's always about who's better, who's prettier, who has more. You pit us all against each other and call it tradition. But it's toxic. And I'm done pretending it's normal. Tears were streaming down Lauren's face now, but she didn't speak. She just stared at her daughter like she was seeing her for the first time. I didn't do it to protect Maya, Hannah said. I did it because I needed to do something. Anything. To show you what it feels like to be publicly embarrassed by someone who's supposed to love you. Lauren finally broke. She collapsed onto the couch like her knees had given out, sobbing openly now, her hands shaking as she tried to reach for Hannah, who remained where she was, still strong, still steady. I'm sorry, Lauren whispered. I didn't know. I didn't realize how far I'd gone. I thought I was being funny. You weren't, I said gently. You were being cruel. And Maya is 7. She still thinks adults know everything. She still believes that family means safety. Lauren looked at me through her tears. I know. I do. And I'm going to fix it. I swear I'm going to try. I don't want an apology for me, I replied. I want one for my daughter. Lauren turned to Maya then, who was watching quietly from her chair, her legs swinging slightly. I'm so sorry, Maya, Lauren said, her voice ragged and raw. What I did to you was wrong. It wasn't funny. It wasn't kind. And I promise I will never, ever treat you like that again. I hope one day you can forgive me. Maya looked at me, then back at Lauren. It really hurt, she said softly. But thank you for saying sorry. And just like that, something in the room shifted. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was full of something new. Relief. Healing. Hope. Aunt Lydia reached out and patted Lauren's hand. We all mess up, she said. But we don't have to keep messing up. Uncle Greg nodded. Maybe we all needed a wake-up call. My mother finally spoke. Kindness has to be the foundation, she said, her voice surprisingly emotional. Respect, too. Otherwise, what's the point of family? Lauren wiped her eyes, stood, and walked over to me. Emma, she said, I can't erase what I did. But I can promise you this, I will do better. And I'll prove it. I nodded. That's all anyone can ask. Everyone stayed a while after that, talking, laughing in that tentative way people do after something heavy has finally been lifted. The room felt different. Warmer. Like maybe, just maybe, we had stopped something before it became permanent. Later, as Maya and I walked out into the evening, she slipped her hand into mine and looked up at me with wide, tired eyes. "Do you think Aunt Lauren really means it?" she asked. I paused, thinking carefully. "I think she wants to," I said. "And sometimes that's the beginning of something better." Maya nodded, her expression thoughtful. We reached the car, and just as I was opening the door, my phone buzzed. A new message. It was from Hannah. "Hannah, thank you for not staying quiet. You helped more than you know." I stared at the screen for a long moment and then smiled. But what none of us expected was the shocking secret. That the spray-painted message wasn't the only thing Hannah had left behind that night.